My son married a wonderful German girl. A couple of years ago, we went out to Munich to visit them. And one day, we got into a car and drove out to the suburbs. It was a little town about 15 minutes northwest of Munich, filled with McDonald's and used car dealerships like any other place in Europe and America. We parked in a gravel parking lot and walked through a grove of trees until we came to an iron fence. And above the fence read 3 German words: Arbeit macht frei. Work will make you free. Of course, it was the entrance to the infamous Dachau concentration camp where more than 30,000 people died, the longest running Nazi camp in German history. Jewish people, Polish people, political prisoners, religious people were all imprisoned there during its 12-year existence. You might remember the words of one of the most famous of Dachau's prisoners, a pastor named Niemöller, who said these words: "First, they came for the communist, but I wasn't a communist, so I kept silent. Then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I said nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist, so I kept silent. They came for the Catholics, but I was a Protestant, so I said nothing. And finally, when they came for me, there was no one left to speak up." Well, those words remind me that someone asked Carl Sandburg, one of America's most famous poets, they asked Sandburg, "What's the ugliest word in the English language?" He thought for a moment, and then he answered, "Exclusive." Exclusive is the ugliest word. Everyone hearing my voice has been a victim of exclusivity. You've been left out on the playground when you were a child. You were left out in school. You've been left out of certain circles at work. Maybe, God forbid, you even feel excluded in your very own home. Most of the evil in the world can be traced back to that very ugly word, exclusive. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's a story in the New Testament from the 2nd chapter of the Acts of the Apostles, where there are people gathered in one place from every nation, every culture, every ethnicity, every language in the face of the earth. And there they hear with one voice in one language the words of a man who calls them to a higher order, calls them to faith, calls them to inclusivity. God loves you, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from. This faith is open to all people. It's open to everyone and anyone. I remember some years ago, a young man died of a drug overdose. I knew his family, and they asked me to do the funeral. Well, rather, the neighbor did, because they were too bereft to give me a call. The neighbor called and asked if I would come over, and I did, and I sat with the family, and they were so heartbroken that they could barely speak. I wanted to get an idea, although I knew the young man, I wanted to get an idea more of his passions and the things in life that he enjoyed, but they just couldn't express it. The grief was too profound and overwhelming. I walked away knowing one thing about this man, this young 20-year-old man who tragically had lost his life. He loved rap music, especially the rap music of Tupac Shakur. Now, you might be surprised by this, but I don't know much about rap music at all. So on the day of his funeral, 20-year-old kids of every color and sexual persuasion and every mode of dress and undress and every hairstyle that you could imagine filed into the funeral home, and they sat there and they looked at me, a white guy wearing a suit, and wondered what I could possibly say. I wondered the same thing. And so I turned not to the words of the Bible, but to the words of a rapper, Tupac, a young man who said that if life had turned out better, he would have been a preacher too. He said these words: "Why am I fighting to live when I'm just living to fight? What am I trying to see? when there ain't nothing in sight? What am I trying to give when no one will give me a try? Why am I dying to live if I'm just living to die? Someone tell me. Friends, our nation is very divided on this weekend. We just can't seem to decide and come to terms with the ugly words in our history. There are people of color who have been excluded and disenfranchised and relegated to the sidelines for so long that there's no other way to express their anger and frustration. We're divided as a people. We can't decide if we're a red state or a blue state. We can't decide about abortion or guns. We can't even decide whether we should wear a mask, whether it's a medical statement or a political statement. But it doesn't have to be that way. The history of our people doesn't have to be one of exclusion. We can remember a time, a call, when every person was called to be included. Every person is a person of worth and value. Every people has something to offer our collective cultures. On this weekend, let's commit ourselves. Let's commit those that we love to a deeper understanding, a greater hope that we can come together as a people in faith, in hope, in love together.